do you have any views on which specific public investments would have the best effect on the macroeconomy? And I wonder if you could make that a little bit more specific to sort of some of the issues that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what I do. Because when we talk about macro, we're generally talking about white people. I hate to say that, but I mean, that's just what it is, right? If we're looking at unemployment or spending or whatever it is, and we see that generally Black and Hispanic households are behind in many of those things. And so I think that one of the biggest things is education, right? Like everybody does not have to get a 4-year degree. I realize that. But we also know that there is a correlation between more education and higher incomes. I also recognize that Black people who have a higher education often do make less than white people with that same level of education or with less education. All that being said, I still say that we need to see more equal investments in education for Black and Hispanic people, starting from Head Start all the way through college and master's degree programs, et cetera. So making those investments and removing some of the accreditation hurdles and just some of the restrictions that many HBCUs and community colleges are well equipped to educate students, if they're allowed to, focus on the 6-year graduation rate, not just the 4-year graduation rate. Provide funds for summer school or extra programs so that schools can get students ready, and allow those same schools to get credit for educating people who are already in the workforce, right? Like if you're not getting a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree, schools have less incentive to provide those courses just based on how accreditation and federal funding shows up, right? So let the groups that do the training, these colleges and universities, do that so that people can get the education and the training and the connections to jobs that they need. That would be my biggest push.
Okay, great. And then JW, for a sort of our final comment here, I wonder if you could kind of connect what Kristen just said, talking about sort of these long run investments with what you and I think Atif and Bharat have been talking about, which is sort of the more short-term goal of full employment. How do those two things interact, those long-term investments and sort of full employment?
I think they go hand in hand. I mean, first of all, on the question, says macro is about white people, and unfortunately it's true, and it's a real problem. I think people are recognizing this. For instance, the definition of the NIRU, the target unemployment rate that the Fed has been using, implies just a permanently much higher unemployment rate for Black Americans. That's how they compute it. And I think a lot of people are realizing that's unacceptable, and you really have to take that into account, that the racial disparities in the labor market get much worse when unemployment is high, and tight labor markets do tend to narrow them. So if there's one group of Americans who really need sustained full employment in tight labor markets, it's Black and to a lesser extent other non-white groups of Americans. So I think that's something we absolutely need to be conscious of. I think the great thing, in a sense, is that the same policies that will deliver us tight labor markets are the same policies that will solve our long-term problems. If we have public investment in climate, first and foremost, in housing, in the care economy, all of those things are going to solve long-term problems, but they're also going to sustain demand and let us get the tight labor markets we need.